Welcome to this webinar today. It's part of a series of webinars called Towards a Metaverse for Social Change, organized by the GuestXR European project. All of these seminars are taking place in June. There's one more to go after this, which we'll talk about later. These seminars are in collaboration with Frontiers in Virtual Reality. And before I move on, I'm going to pass over to Marta, who's representing Frontiers here today. So over to you, Marta.
Thank you, Mel. Thank you, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here today to introduce Frontiers in Virtual Reality with an open access journal that explored possibilities of virtual reality, augmented reality, and mixed reality, led by Professor Mel Slater. We just received our new journal impact factor yesterday. So we will update the slides for the last webinar next week, which is now 3.6. And also our recent site score is now 8.5. So the journal is growing so much. Also thanks to all our editorial board leadership. Mel, next slide, please. Where you can see the slide before, where you can see all our chief editors working in all our 6 specialty section, and also the journal team where I'm part of to support from the technical side, the peer review process, etc. The next slide shows you a bit of some highlights of the journal. Our most viewed and cited research topics, which is the way we call our article collection or special issues, probably the word you are more familiar with, and also just a couple of most cited papers. But everything you can see, it's on our website, because as open access publisher, all our articles are available without any paywall. And finally, I just wanted to mention in that last slide, one of our article collections still open for submission, led by topic editors and topic coordinators who contributed to the last webinar series in 2024, organized by GuestXR and Frontiers in Virtual Reality. Thank you so much, and I remain available if anybody has any questions, please write me in the chat.
Thank you. So this seminar series, as I said, is organized by the project GuestXR. GuestXR stands for Developing a Machine Learning Agent for Social Harmony in Extended Reality. The basic idea of GuestXR is that it's concerned with virtual meetings in other words, meetings in virtual, augmented, or mixed reality, or in general extended reality. And every meeting has a purpose, even if that meeting is entertainment. I mean, entertainment is just as important, I think, as having a business meeting because it's part of the enjoyment of life. But sometimes meetings go wrong. I mean, even a meeting for entertainment, argument may break out or something else can go wrong. And certainly in business and scientific meetings, sometimes they go off the point. So the idea of GuestXR is that in the background, or even in the foreground, because there's many different possible representations, there's an AI agent which watches what's going on all the time and intervenes to try to help the meeting reach its objectives. So that's the point of GuestXR. And what we're doing today is we're discussing a particular topic which has arisen over the years of this project, which is GuestXR, is the AI an uninvited guest? Can AI, haptics, and neuroscience improve virtual reality meetings? But in the term improve, we also mean possibly they don't improve, possibly make things worse. We don't know. We still don't know, because there's ethical problems associated with this, which remain to be explored. So I'd like the panel members today, to each one of you, to introduce yourselves and Tell us about your own experience of virtual meetings in virtual reality or extended reality and how they might be improved. So introduce yourself, where you are, what you work on briefly, and how your experience of virtual meetings may be improved. So I'm just going to read off from the order I see people here. And the first one is Doron.
Hi again, hi everyone. So Doron Friedman. My background is quite diverse, but doing mostly XR and more recently deep neural networks in XR in the last 7 years. And as part of the guest project, we are in charge of developing the AI platform and the AI methods and algorithms. Any other?
And
And
what about,
I'm
yes,
currently in
your
North.
experience of virtual meetings?
So I think uh, not too many people had good experiences of virtual meetings because there's a big difference between doing it as as something just to play around and to check to see what it is like, and then doing a real meeting. I find that there is a very big difference. So, when we play with the students and we demonstrate virtual meetings, it's one thing. When you actually schedule a meeting instead of a Zoom call, it's a really magical experience. I cannot say that it's similar to a real world meeting, but it's very similar from a Zoom meeting and from a real world meeting. That's my
Okay,
impression.
so your own experience of meetings in virtual reality, in fact, using one of the guest XR platforms so far has been good, better than Zoom meetings.
It's very
Okay,
different.
so
Yeah.
and okay, Andre.
Uh, uh, I am a social psychologist by training. I also work on social aspects of new technologies. I specialize in computer simulations of social processes. I am a professor of psychology at the University of Warsaw and Florida Atlantic University. My experience in I am I am interested in mainly in social psychology, and in areas such as conflict, group dynamics, and the self structure and social influence. In GuestXR, I am responsible for developing social computer simulation of social processes. And here, the idea is that before we can start uh, using XR, reinforcement learning, to improve, to build the guest logic and to improve whatever process you want to improve. I mean, we need to have some initial data, which is unrealistic to gather with humans. So basically, we want to pre-train the models on computer simulation models. So our task is to develop the simulation models, and I'm also involved in the project, or our group is also involved in the project of the climate case virtual reality game. So I'll be talking about those two things. Thank you. Oh, my experience
Okay, thank you. Yes, your experience of virtual meetings. Yeah.
in virtual meeting is not that large. Generally, it has been very interesting, and it was a mixture of amazing reality, but also because it was also kind of work when we're testing new applications. Certain things were. So this was also some imperfections, like people kind of walking through objects and so on, was kind of interesting for me, kind of a bit. So this was, but generally I think, and I was also missing a little bit facial expressions. So I think this would be the way to make it, enhance the social presence, make it better.
Okay, thank you. So for you, like small imperfections, like as you said, intersecting with objects and so on, they upset the experience a bit, but otherwise you've been happy with it.
Yes.
Okay, so Beatrice de Gelder.
Hello, I'm Beatrice de Gelder. I work as a neuroscientist at Maastricht University. Our main topic of research is nonverbal communication. Andre already mentioned face, but we are much more focusing on how you communicate with overall body movements, body gestures, body postures, etc. So that, of course, has a direct link to virtual reality in the sense that to pick up the issue of virtual meetings, I've had some limited experience, just like Doron. And one thing that did strike me is that if they would allow for a much broader much broader variability and much broader communication through whole body postures and movements, positioning, moving in space, getting closer away from others, then is of course possible on Zoom meetings. So the much more approximate real life meetings with this extra intriguing factor, as Doron mentioned also, that there is something magical about the meetings virtual reality that you don't have in, for example, Zoom or whatever team meetings. So that's
Yes. So like sorry. Yes. So like what you're saying is that in Zoom meetings, we can't use our bodies to look around and see where everyone is, and we don't really know what anyone's doing. They could be reading email, but in the virtual reality meetings, we have the sense of proxemics with other people. We can use our bodies to locate them and see if they're looking at us, for example. But
yes.
you'd like more of that with, for example, being able to move around, touch feedback, and so on. So talking of touch feedback, Anatoly.
Yes, hello everyone. Really happy to be here. Anatole Lécuyer, I'm a INRIA research director at, so INRIA is the French National Research Institute in computer science in France. We are located in the far west of France, in the Brittany region. And our group is working on improving 3D interactions with virtual worlds, with metaverses. And we are exploring different ways of improving interactions, for instance, with brain-computer interfaces, but it's not the topic of the day. The topic of the day for us in this project, especially, is haptics. So we are in charge in the project of designing haptic interactive techniques, technologies based on force feedback or touch and tactile interfaces, with the intention to augment social interactions in metaverses and hopefully support positive social interactions, for instance, by means of actions from the guests in a meeting for supporting in a haptic way, in a tactile way, the participants of the meetings. And in terms of my own experience of virtual meetings, and especially how they might be improved, I'm still a bit annoyed by the fact that we still are facing those tracking issues in most of the meetings, and our body, the body of our virtual avatars, they usually, after just a few seconds, they look really strange and scary with our heads turned upside down, or our hands, which are totally at 90 degrees, for instance, and so on. So I think it's something really that, of course, will be sooner or later improved, but it's a bit annoying at the moment. And more generally, I think that also if we think and believe that VR is about going much further than reality, we still actually are a bit too close to imitating the real meetings. And there's a lot of space and freedom of thinking here and innovation for inventing what should be maybe a real virtual and magical experience of a virtual meeting, which is maybe going further away from the real and from the real way of doing meetings.
Thanks very much. That's very, very interesting. I really support that view. And I agree with completely with the fact that things can go wrong, like your hands appearing in the wrong place. this is also a function of the devices we use, which don't have cameras everywhere. So if your hand goes out of view of the camera, the body gets distorted, or parts of it anyway. But these are very, very interesting points. So, and then Wieslav. Hello? You're muted, sorry.
So I introduce myself again. Hello, everybody. Thank you for this. But I am also from Warsaw, University of Warsaw, working in a team of Professor Andrzej Nowak, helping mostly on implementing logic of this climate game, but also exploring how we can introduce AI to virtual reality. And in terms of my experience with virtual meeting, I'm also artist, and I'm very devoted with my artwork to real reality and try to do magic in real space. So for me, virtual space is a big mysteries. And yeah, like other people, I have this problem with my control of my body in virtual reality. I don't feel this to be comfortable in virtual reality because I feel disconnected from real reality, and I have this feeling of losing control of my body as I perceive in this space. I don't know exactly. So this is kind of discomfort for me. And also this, like other people mentioned, this crazy situation that the body is distorted, and also the facial expression is only limited to kind of eye contact, but still, I think there is a lot to improve, and it looks promising and interesting, and I think worth exploring. But yeah, there is long way to go yet.
Yes, so I mean, it relates to Anatole's point that we don't want virtual reality to be exactly like reality. We should be able to go beyond reality, but not in a way that we have distorted vampire-like bodies or something like that. Yeah. So, and then the next question, actually, first it's addressed to Doron, but actually it's open to anybody. But let's ask Doron first of all. So all of us have had interactions with AI agents like Gemini, ChatGPT, etc. We talk to them. A lot of us do every day with a textual interface or even a voice interface. But how important do you think it is that these agents should be embodied as virtual characters that directly look at you and speak to you and act as if they're human? Are you happy with just the textual or voice interface, or do you want to be sitting or whatever, talking directly in extended reality to a humanoid type representation of these virtual characters? So Doron, first of all.
Yeah, thanks. So I think already people are, I mean, we have to realize that it's a moving target. The AI interfaces target is moving very quickly. And I think people are now starting to get used to voice interface with, with these language models. And I guess, flat screen is kind of avatars or video avatars. At the moment, it's quite expensive to generate it in real time, but I guess that will be coming. So people will get used to all kinds of interfaces. Text, I think, was just the beginning. The other thing is that we've done a study. It's not a full, complete study, but we've compared. This was, I think, in a time of GPT-3 or maybe, I don't remember if it was GPT-3 or 3.5, which is ChatGPT. We compared whether you can detect the big five, the personality of the agent. Let's say you give the agent a personality, and then you ask the interlocutor whether they can guess the big five personality traits of that person. And in text, this worked very well. Not perfect, but quite well. And when the LLM was embodied in VR, it was like chance level. And we don't know why. Of course, there could be many reasons. But it's clear that it's a completely different experience. But then, okay, and the next point, of course, there's a huge difference even between meeting a visual avatar on a flat screen than meeting an avatar in VR or in XR. So, there's so many possibilities. I think for us in this community, in the guests, the more interesting difference is not so much the fact of multimodal versus unimodal versus text, voice. It's the fact that we do have this amazing illusion when the VR is done properly that we are with that someone in the room. And I think that's something that you can only get in VR. So if you want to experience like a really intersubjective experience with someone, like with a real person, it's only in VR. With these kind of aliens, the AI models, then it's probably going to be in VR. Yeah, I think there's quite a lot to talk about these things, but I'll pass it to you guys to comment or question.
Thanks. I recently had an experience, like you said, where this was mixed reality. So I was wearing the Quest 3 head-mounted display, and one of my students here in Barcelona, I forgot to say who I am, Mel Slater, University of Barcelona. So one of my students here in the event lab in Barcelona, they're building a project where people from who are separated from each other by distance, nevertheless can meet together in virtual reality or actually in mixed reality. And we tested it. So I was at home in my living room. I put on the head-mounted display. We started up the application, and suddenly there she was in my living room, and that was like a very profound shock. So we becoming used to having meetings in virtual reality, but they're in virtual spaces. But it's much more powerful when you do it in extended reality and you see the remote person actually sitting apparently a couple of meters or a meter away from you, sitting there comfortably talking to you as if she is in the same real space as you. So I think this is also something to be explored, the difference between virtual reality and mixed reality. Does anyone else want to come in on this point about whether you're happy talking to AIs through text or voice, or do you prefer, depending on context, of course, to have a virtual representation of that AI? Yes, Beatrice, yeah, you're muted, sorry.
It really depends, I think, on the nature of the conversation. When I want to ask something to take ChatGPT about what time does the boat between X and Y arrive, then I really can do without an anthropomorphic agent. Funny enough, people will still project a real presence behind the text message. And they will still try to sort of be polite and may on occasion try to be rude to a text message. So that's like the general psychological setup we have of forever thinking we are surrounded by social agents. But I think it would be useful to have some research also in terms of the involvement and the cost of those things, to see for what kind of interactions real embodiment and real avatars contribute anything. Sometimes I'm really irritated. My bank has some character, some avatar with a name, and I just don't want to have to deal with them. Give me a text message and calculate the stuff for me, and don't add this pretense of a physical human presence. So for other things it matters. So it's we are at the beginning of this kind of virtual life, of course. So we should try to understand better what for the context and where it adds something versus where it's really a waste of effort and means.
Yeah, sure. I had an interesting experience this morning. My daughter went in a taxi and she left her earphones in the taxi. And I asked ChatGPT what we could do I talked to ChatGPT as I was walking in the street, just like as if it was a phone call, and asked what we could do about it. And then ChatGPT responded in this really sympathetic voice. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. I'm really sorry. And actually, I know it's all just an AI agent, but it was really powerful, making me think, this person has sympathy to our situation. It's really interesting. Anyway, now the next question again is this one is actually for everyone. Some people, like the actual quite famous author and historian Yuval Harari, have argued very strongly and repeatedly every single day I see a new a YouTube or podcast, have argued that it should be illegal for AI agents to portray themselves as human. What do you think about this? Do you think it should be illegal?
It certainly should be.
Yes.
Given as my example and your example clearly, and everyone's experience clearly illustrates, I mean, it should be somehow controlled, because this tendency of seeing real agents behind, of seeing real people behind the slightest sliver of human, quasi-human presence is so strong, and people are so defenseless. In such circumstances, that it should somehow be ruled. Yes, I mean, illegal is a strong term, of course, but
yeah, Andre?
I would very much agree with Beatrice that agents should not pretend to be humans. I would have nothing against, very realistic agents driven by AI in games or in other context where we are looking for entertainment, or other when we know that there are AI agents. However, I think we live in a world where the fake reality, intermixes with our real reality, and I think that this is, we should be trying to keep a barrier between what's real and what's I would say unreal. So I would say that I would modify this demand that AI should not mislead, people thinking that they're humans. But I have nothing against, very realistic agents being shown, in games and so on. As long
Yeah,
as
I'm not a
it's
big
a difficult. Sorry, yeah, who's speaking? Yeah,
Wiesław.
who is that?
I'm not a big fan
Okay,
of Harari, but in this case, I like this his comparison of fake people to fake money. So you have fake people, you have fake relation, you have fake trust. So it's like a fake money. If you allow to put a fake money on the market, you destroy the market. If you put fake people in social reality, you distort the social reality, and you destroy society on the end. So this I agree 100%.
yes, yeah, yes, is one of his arguments that just as counterfeiting has been illegal for hundreds of years, so he's arguing that impersonating people should also be illegal in the same way. Yeah, it's very difficult in virtual reality because we don't want to interact with virtual agents with like a sign on top of their head saying, I'm not a real person. This defeats the whole point of virtual reality. But we have to find some solution where we can interact with agents represented in a humanoid way and always know that they're virtual without destroying the whole points of co-presence and so on. Anyway, going back to Doron, we're still staying on the AI side of the GuestXR project. Can you tell us something about how the AI in GuestXR works? I mean, what was the original plan? How is it developed? Something about the technical side of it.
Right. So let me say that very interestingly, even though we wrote the proposal quite a few years ago, the framework that we set has become really, really timely from an AI point of view. I mean, VR is still maybe down the road, maybe delayed by a few years, but right now you can check one of the themes that are discussed in the AI community by, I think the name is Shunyu Yao. It's an Asian name. It's a guy that works in OpenAI, and he calls it the second half. And what he says is exactly moving in parallel trajectories to what we're doing in the GuestXR. So what he says, which of course is very controversial, you don't have to agree with it, but he says, look, now in AI, after whatever, 10, 12 years of the deep learning revolution, we have a recipe to solve any problem in the world. And the recipe is 3 parts. First of all, priors, for example, language or, video priors or whatever, learning from self-supervised data. Second, goal-oriented behavior using RL or variants of RL. And third, he says that's the recipe. And now all we have to do is we have to work on more ambitious benchmarks. So he says, look, once you have these 2 components and you have a benchmark, then, it might be a little difficult. You might have to tweak things, but you can solve any benchmark. And he says, coming from industry and OpenAI, and he says, okay, so now all we have rest as AI engineers is to come up with more ambitious benchmarks that are more like the real world. Now, again, it's a controversial view. No, not everyone would agree to that view, but the GuestXR, if you consider it from an AI point of view, says, look, we do reinforcement learning, but we also may use other techniques. And we're trying to come up with new benchmarks, which is social intelligence benchmarks. And these are ones that are left for later stages, by the mainstream in AI. So things like turn taking, nonverbal behavior in the multi-party discussions, again in VR, in XR, etc. So these are all very timely, very ambitious. Probably going to take a few trillions of dollars or billions of dollars to figure out properly. And in GuestXR, we've done some of these things in either as basic research or as a demo or prototype level, really working on turn-taking behavior, self-improvement models for learning, non-verbal, etc., etc.
Thanks very much. I want to remind the attendees that if you have any questions, please put them into chat and we will get to them. Andre, you want to come in on this?
I'll just want to chip in to fill in on the importance of benchmarks and the difficulty of benchmark that Doron has mentioned. We have in social literature, for example, it shows that the satisfaction in group discussion depends or is positively correlated with randomness of this discussion. So, for example, if we intervene and make discussion by intervention more predictable, by in an unintended consequence, we may decrease the satisfaction, or that moderator, by interrupting discussion in say non-perfect way, may actually break the discussion. So I think this is very important to have, and very difficult. One of the main things is to set up the proper benchmarks, right? Which is a combination of different, or that contain different types of knowledge concerning the process. Because usually AI can, if given very simple criteria to improve, they can usually find a shortcut that may go against our intentions. I would say that this is not such a simple task as it seems, and designing a good benchmark can be extremely difficult, or set of benchmarks.
Thanks very much. Actually, I was going to move on to haptics, but I've seen a very interesting question from someone named Diego pop up. He says, on the topic of AI disclosing that they're AI, what about humans faking that they are AI to get away with bad behavior? What do you think about that? Very interesting. I never thought of that before. Yeah.
Actually, I thought about that, but there is a bit of a paradox in that question, because if a human makes an AI to get away with bad behavior, that AI will have a sticker on his front saying "I am AI," right? So
yeah. Yes.
If we can agree on some kind of marker that we put on AI to say they are AI, then luckily that issue would not arise.
So what you mean is that if somebody is interacting with an AI with an agent that looks like it's AI,
as I understood the question, if I make an AI of myself in order to engage in whatever despicable behavior in the internet, the AI, even if I made it about myself, will have a note on its front saying I am an AI.
Okay, right. Maybe so. Okay, so I understand. Any other comments on that? Okay, so I'd like to move on to haptics. So Doron, yeah, you had a comment?
No, just final. So basically, my understanding from what you're asking, it's a matter of deception. So most types of deceptions are considered impolite or non-appropriate social behavior, and sometimes they pass the threshold of being illegal or unethical, I guess. And I guess what you're saying is that Yuval Noah Harari is saying that an AI posing as a human has passed the threshold of its mere deception, even if it doesn't steal anything, even if it doesn't do any harm. I think that's the interesting question. And I'm not sure what the justification is, but maybe he's got a point. And I think this goes to all kinds of deception, including humans pretending to be AI. But yes, I think it's a matter of fact that we are living in very, very interesting times of not necessarily sentient, but active, intelligent agents, which are playing interesting roles in society.
Yeah,
Yes.
I have a
Thanks.
comment as well. Good morning.
Good morning.
My name
Could
is
you
Tony.
introduce yourself, please?
Yes, my name is Tony, and I have an opportunity to be doing research with Dr. Martin Baelish from the University of Birmingham. We have a project in mind with VR, and I just want to comment about the maliciousness of the AI. The AI can be tricked into doing things that it doesn't know is malicious. For example, if I set up an API, an application programmable interface in the cloud that does malicious things, I can have the AI call that API. So based on certain situations, I say, call this API. It doesn't really know what it's calling. It thinks the API does such. I don't tell the AI what the API is really doing, but I have it automate all the calls and it orchestrates all the calls with the API, but it's the API that's actually doing the malicious attacks. So I'm afraid that even though the AI, its guidelines won't do something that violates its guidelines, you can manipulate the AI to do your work and it won't know that it's doing malicious work. So there'll be on the bad character side, a lot of people trying to achieve malicious attacks that way, and the AI won't really know it's doing bad things.
Okay, thanks very much. I mean, it goes back to Doron's general point about deception. Okay, so what you've given is a technical way that this may be achieved.
Right.
So now I'd like to move on to haptics. Thank you. Now I'd like to move on to haptics. I mean, obviously we're concerned with virtual meetings, and virtual meetings are obviously meetings between people. One of the most important ways that people interact is through touch and force feedback and so on. Someone pats you on the shoulder or whatever. So can you say something about the role of haptics, Anatole, in the GuestXR project and what you've done, what you've achieved, what the goals are? Thanks.
Yes, sure. Thanks for the question, Mel. It's true, as you said, that haptic feedback is playing a central role in social interactions, and we have all the experience of this in our daily life. As you said, the classical examples are shoulder tapping, high fives, handshaking, strokes, hugs, and so on. So there are regular social interactions which are mediated by touch, actually, and touch is playing a central non-verbal role in those social interactions. It's known also that it's fundamental for the cognitive development of babies or children, for instance. So from the very beginning of the GuestXR projects, our intention was to consider this sensory modality as a playing means to augment the social interactions in the future metaverse and see how it's connected with this idea of trying to influence in a positive way the social interactions. So we have been investigating many actually research path on this topic in GuestXR. Of course, it's not completely new because indeed in the haptics community, the research community, this research path is quite well known under different names, mostly, for instance, social touch. And there are many papers published on this topic in the past decades. In the project, we have tried to adopt a systematic approach where we really decompose the different situations in terms, for instance, of direct or indirect contact. So you can really physically engage in a contact with another participant of the meeting, or it's a remote contact, it's an indirect contact, like you are moving together an object, or you have a shared interaction with the same object. You can also consider that in this case, I can give examples, for instance, for direct contact, we have tried to, it's ongoing work actually, we have tried to build some contactors which are making some pressure on your body to simulate remotely those interactions where we are touching each other, for instance, on the shoulder or on the forearm. And then we have also considered the intriguing way of using haptics in a very different way, not necessarily for simulating contacts and physical interactions, but also to support, for instance, non-verbal communication and transmit emotions or moods across participants. This is also called sometimes affective haptics. It relates to affective haptics, also a famous research topics in the field. In this case, for instance, we try to raise empathy during virtual meetings by transmitting remotely the mood of another participant of the meeting. For instance, if you feel the stress of another participant, maybe your empathy toward this other participant is also going to increase more. And then you will be more prone to assist this or to help this or support this other participant during the virtual meeting. And last, we tried also verbal communication, and that's the most surprising results we got, maybe the most novel in the GuestXR project. We try to see if haptics could be a good way to enhance verbal communication, meaning that while I'm speaking right now, you could feel a haptic feedback, for instance, a vibration, which is synchronized with my speech. So it's a speech to touch. I'm going to translate my speech into vibration, which is very easy to do with common vibrators, which are embedded, for instance, in mobile phones like this one. And if I'm doing so, and you are receiving a vibration at the same time I'm speaking, then we found in GuestXR that during a virtual meeting, it could increase artificially your trust and my persuasion, the trust in what I'm saying. And it was a very surprising and unexpected result, which directly comes from exchanges inside GuestXR, and which is opening a nice research avenue and nice opportunities for enhancing virtual meetings, especially, for instance, for shy people or people who are not speaking a lot, to increase their weight in the meeting and facilitating their speaking in the meeting. And we call it persuasive haptics. So these are the salient examples of what we were doing in GuestXR to promote haptics technology as a way to support social interactions in virtual meetings.
Yeah, so very interesting. Is it, I have to keep coming back to the ethics issues. So persuasive haptics, again, raises a kind of, are there problems associated with that you've thought about on the ethical side?
Yeah.
Like, could it be used in advertising, for example, or political persuasion?
Totally. So, of course, with those good applications that we are promoting in GuestXR, of course, one can think of potentially risky and malveillant usages of this technology to enhance the speech of a politician, or to on the contrary, to increase the weight of people who are already very engaged and heavy in the discussion. So, of course, there are those two possibilities. We mentioned them in our publications, and we don't have a solution here. We are just observing an effect and raising, as you said, Mel, those concerns about the good usage and potentially bad usage of this. And in the context of GuestXR also, the AI Act and the fact that people should be aware and agree on how the technologies they are exposed to are somehow manipulating or influencing potentially their opinions and their thoughts or their speech is something very important that we have considered in the project, actually in the frame of our project, in the course of our projects, due to the evolution of the regulations, and clearly it's something that needs to be done, especially leaving the people aware about what is done and with the possibility to choose and select what they are exposed to.
Thanks very much. It goes back to what you were saying earlier about using virtual reality or extended reality to go beyond what's possible in reality. In reality, the only way we can transmit our emotions is by how we look and how we move and so on, how we talk. But you're making a more direct transmission through some kind of haptic transmission from one person to the other. Very interesting. So, Beatrice, I think you also have done some haptics work.
We have and we are doing some haptic work. One thing we did with Anatol was investigate to what extent haptic stimulation would influence your. If you assume that the haptic stimulation is a stand-in for being in touch and being touched by somebody, then the question arises: if you're in a situation of danger, would that influence your behavior to feel that you are not alone? So that's kind of that kind of study we did. We also currently experimenting with a haptic vest, which is a jacket you wear, and that is programmed with various environmental sounds, going from scary to joyful sounds. And that is, among other things, a possibility to involve people that are hard of hearing, because the sounds can be transmitted as vibrations through the haptic jacket. So that's also one enrichment of virtual reality situations. That's
great. There's a whole work package in the project which is concerned actually with people with hard of hearing and so on. They're not represented specifically here today, but Beatrice has been, as you heard, been doing some work in that area in relation to using haptics for that purpose. So I'd like to remind everyone that you can post questions in the chat. While we're talking, Beatrice, can you say something about the neuroscience underpinning of this project? How do models from neuroscience and social psychology, this relates also to Andrea, how do the models from neuroscience and social psychology help GuestXR interpret group dynamics and intervene effectively in virtual meetings? Can you say something about the neuroscience underpinnings?
Well, the big intriguing thing for neuroscientists is to see how little bits by little bits things we know from human and non-human primate non-human primate research about what we know about social behavior can be found in virtual interaction contexts also. For example, very famous findings from neuroscience about the importance and the gradations of personal space, or peripersonal space. We find that those measures obtain very similarly in virtual reality. You feel somebody is coming too close to you or staying at a safe distance from you. You feel that exactly the same way in virtual reality. Then we know it to operate in plain reality. So that's of course gives you an insight into how deceptive or how convincing, if you want to be be virtual reality can be. So if I really would summarize the current situation, it would be saying that virtual reality, experiments in virtual reality really convince us more and more that essential coordinates of social behavior obtain as well in virtual reality than they do in physical reality, and that of course is the power, but also the risk of virtual reality. And it was not obvious that this would be the case, because people have sometimes criticized neuroscience, social neuroscience, as working with very artificial, very simple, reduced situations. But now that we can work with virtual reality simulacrs of complex social situations, we do see that very much the same determinants of social behavior obtained in virtual than in physical reality. If this was not the case, then there would be much less of a problem, much less of an ethics issue with virtual reality. But the more we understand neuroscientifically about virtual reality, you could say the more we understand, the more we see how real the risks are, the benefits and the risks are.
Yes, so it's very much a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
Yes. So, Andrea, do you want to come in on this as well?
Sure. I think that our main task is to simulate social processes occurring in virtual reality, following what Beatrice says. We are using models from real reality as a basic of our models, and then we can see, how much the same processes occur in virtual reality. But we start from assuming, similarity. We are inspired here by I would say one of the founders of social psychology, Kurt Lewin, who basically started this field of group dynamics, and he viewed what's happening in social groups as the interplays of forces, both within the person, psychological forces, and between people, the social forces. And this is so this is basically how we try to develop our models, but we also try to incorporate some findings from neuroscience. So the basis of our model is the motor threshold speaking theory, which basically says that person starts to speak when there is enough, I would say, pressure or enough activation in the cortex has accumulated to start speaking. Into this, we introduce social concepts such as social expectations, conformity, power dynamics, and so on. So we really build a model kind of based on psychological theories that were derived and based on observations and experiments in reality, and then we will be able to see how these models, allow to build simulation that allows the agent, the GuestXR, to moderate in a meaningful way, in a beneficial way, social interactions in virtual reality. So we have our idea is that we have four basic processes, that we have four, okay, the main of the idea of the main promise or the main challenge of the model was to integrate findings on group discussions, which mostly were about which in this context were mainly about turn taking, who speaks after whom, and kind of enrich it with the dynamics, how long people talk, how much they interrupt, about the non-verbal social feedback, and so on. So we found up with kind of describing or simulating four basic processes. The first process is deciding to speak, and the basic idea is that accumulated both external and internal pressure exceed a specific threshold. Here is the link to the neurophysical model threshold theory. The person starts to speak. Another process is just speaking, which simulates how long a person will speak and takes into account the social feedback in the form of back-channel communication, I mean non-verbal communication of the listeners, then the process of listening, which decides about how the activation, what happens to the activation and the internal pressure to speak. And finally, the back channel communication. So kind of our idea is based on number of psychological theories, a little bit of neural theories to try to understand the dynamics of are occurring within each individual and between them that that can simulate the complex and emergent dynamics of group discussion.
Thanks. So I should say that your models, the idea is that they provide data that feed into the reinforcement learning programs that are behind the GuestXR agent, because in order to run the reinforcement learning, we need loads and loads of data, and we can't run millions of real meetings between people. So your work is kind of like a simulated stand-in for the real meetings. And Anatole.
Yes, a quick answer. Actually, there are many comments and suggestions in the chat window, so it's great. Thank you, everyone, for asking those questions and putting those references. It's very valuable. There is one question on which maybe some of us would like to rebound. The question is from Adriana. In your opinion, how important is cultural adaptability in the design of haptic interfaces? So first of all, regarding haptic interfaces, it's really depending on the context. I guess cultural adaptability is not really important when you are dealing with a haptic context, when you are, for instance, interacting remotely with a robot in a teleoperation task, and then the haptic interface here and the force feedback is probably less sensitive to cultural adaptability, but this is, of course, to be checked, but I don't think it's the main issue here in this context. But in our context in the project, when we are dealing with social interactions, of course, haptics, but not only haptics, actually, all the techniques we are talking about and all the techniques designed in GuestXR could be also revisited depending on cultures and cultural adaptability. This is something that we have not much studied in the projects for time reasons, and there were many other challenges, but I guess it's indeed remaining a very important and open aspects and future works.
Thanks very much. I'd like to bring in this, we're going to finish on time, but maybe you can comment on this question from Elizabeth Gackenheimer. And I think it's really about the chameleon effect in social science, that this is where when people are communicating, if they're in rapport with each other, they tend to adopt similar postures and movements and even breathing synchronously with each other and so on. So in GuestXR or any virtual reality setup, it's possible to simulate that. She says that with virtual agents, you could make them coherent. Perhaps as the technology progresses, it would be possible to create virtual tutors that match the students. We don't have time to look at the rest of her question. So imagine a situation where you have a tutor and a student, and using maybe the haptic technology from Anatole, they can be made to have rapport together. As he said, one person is speaking and the other person feels it in vibrations. Do you think this would help, this kind of artificially induced rapport following the chameleon effect from social science? So it would be something possible with GuestXR and desirable?
Yeah, so maybe the others would like to comment, but I think indeed it's something that needs to be tested indeed, and but it makes total sense to try this kind of approach. It's perfectly in line with what we have done and in line with the objective of the project. But maybe others would like to rebound on this before we close.
Okay, we'll leave it at that. I think technically it's certainly possible, but we don't know the outcome until we try it. So GuestXR is it's been running for 2.5 years or 3.5 years. We've got 6 months left, and it's been a very enjoyable and exciting project. I was going to say there's going to be one more seminar, possibly on AI, run by Doron next week. We don't know if this is going to happen or not. It will be next Thursday at the same time, and it's about the AI aspects of virtual reality. And actually, whether it takes place or not doesn't depend on us, but on the outcome of a war. So thanks everyone for attending, and hope to see you next Thursday at the same time. Any last comments by anybody before we close?
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Bye-bye.